So although next week I will talk about the plethora of winter holidays that abound this time of year, this week I thought I would just share a little bit from our Christian sources, the holiday of Advent. It is celebrated by Christians the 4 Sundays prior to Christmas. I have to admit, I really didn't know much. I grew up in the Jewish tradition, so I really didn't experience Advent, but I understand there's a lot of fun with calendars, and it's funny, when you look it up, that's the first thing that comes up on the Google search. Also about the color scheme. I don't know why, but that seemed to be important. So I wore purple today. I guess it's purple, and as well wreaths, which I'm not quite sure the religious significance of that, but for Christian traditionalists, it is the celebrating the birth of Jesus and awaiting with hope for the return of the Messiah. A hope for a better future through divine intervention. More progressive Christians might look to it as a time of year to look within, to better understand their relationship with Jesus and to think about how the meaning of Jesus is in their daily lives. But how does this holiday have some meaning for us as Unitarian Universalists? For those of us who find meaning in the teachings of Jesus, it can be a time set aside to reflect on those teachings. And just so you know, this spring I will be leading a class on the teachings of Jesus, so I invite you all to participate in that. You'll hear more about that from Adult Ari as well. And as well, I think it is always good for people to stop and think about our relationships, whether they be relationships with Jesus or relationships with our family or with our congregation or with our friends, to stop and think about what we think about our place in the universe and what future we do hope for. We're often so busy doing that we sometimes just don't stop to remember why we are doing it. So in this busy time of year, especially, I think, in this busy time of year, I encourage you to stop and take some time, at least even if it's a few moments every day, just to think about your future. It's good always, I think, to be reminded of the values of hope, patience, and resiliency. It's good to take time to read from your sacred text, whatever that sacred text may be for you. It is a holiday of waiting, waiting for a better future, waiting for change. Although I think if you ask most children, they'll tell you they're waiting for presents. But it reminds me, honestly, when I keep thinking I hear the word waiting, I do that sort of word association game in my mind, always. And the word that comes up always is waiting for Godot. It was a play, yeah, man, some of you heard of it, where the characters spend this bleak, purposeless life waiting for a visitor that never comes. And I say, and I remember seeing that play, it had such an impact on me, and it was, no, it's better to engage the unknown, not to wait. And I think that is part of what Unitarian Universalism does. It asks us to engage the unknown. But it is my hope to lift this holiday and this holiday season to transcend the mere gift giving, but rather to give people hope. I think it is interesting, actually, in the 4 Christian Gospels, telling about the story of Jesus, the word hope actually only appears 3 times, actually, and 2 of those times they appear actually in a negative sense, about not having hope in this thing or that thing. The word hope, though, does appear in the word of Acts and many of the writings of the Apostle Paul after the death of Jesus, after the fall, after the failed Jewish revolution, after the death of, for some of them, their friend, and for others, their spiritual leader. When hope for change did not happen, that is when hope is needed most. Now, the word faith is used often in the Scriptures, but I think hope is different than faith. Faith is a belief in the unknown. Hope, I would say, is a belief in something that we can experience. Our Unitarian Universalist religion inspires us to imagine a world with peace, liberty, and justice for all. But just waiting is a sort of passive hope. Hope does require patience and perseverance, but it requires action as well. Joanna Macy, who I mentioned earlier, in her book Active Hope, which I highly encourage you to read, it's a great book, she writes, and I quote, "The word hope has two different meanings. The first involves hopefulness, where our preferred outcome seems reasonably likely to happen. If we require this kind of hope before we commit ourselves to an action, our response gets blocked in areas where we don't rate our chances too high. The second meaning is about desire and what we would like to happen in our world. The future we hope for, the kind of world we long for so much that it hurts. It's a kind of hope that starts our journey. It is what we do with this hope that really makes the difference. Passive hope is about waiting for external agencies to bring about what we desire. Active hope is about becoming active participants in bringing about what we hope for." End quote. Unitarian Universalism believes that humanity is an active participant in creation. That what we do here in this world matters, for better and for worse. And I know things at times can seem challenging. But we don't have to wait for some cataclysmic event to happen in our world to change the way our world is. One of our strengths that we have as humans is the power of our imagination, imagining a better future. It's not enough, though, to imagine. But imagining is where it starts. And that is the faith I have, that we have the ability to change. So I know that's faith in something unknown, right? But I have that faith. The ability to change ourselves and how we live in the world, and thus by doing so, we can change the world itself. But it's not easy. Because I often say, if it was easy, anyone could do it, right? And anything worth doing requires hard work. That's that old Puritan ethic that I was raised, and most of us, I think, were raised in. Brene Brown, author and research professor of social work, states, and I quote, "The new cultural belief that everything should be fun, fast, and easy is inconsistent with hopeful thinking. It also sets us up for hopelessness. When we experience something that is difficult and requires significant time and effort, we are quick to think, well, that's supposed to be easy. It's not worth the effort, or this should be easier. It's only hard and slow because maybe I'm not good at it." Hopeful self-talk, though, sounds more like this. "This is tough, but I can do it." End quote. So how through the face of insurmountable obstacles do we have hope? So I was going to share with you a clip from the movie Matrix Revolution. How many of you have seen the movie Matrix Revolution? Well, not as many as I might have hoped. Okay, so without the clip, it won't be as dramatic. But for those who are unfamiliar with it, the protagonist, Mr. Anderson, becomes aware that his entire existence is all in his imagination through a computer program called the Matrix. And he frees himself, but the computers are really overpowering. And it is ironic because in the plot of the film, the computer program gives the humans hope of freedom as a way of keeping them engaged in the program. Without hope for something better, humans rejected the programming itself. So like they tried to have them imagine and live in an ideal world, and they just rejected that, right? So as if hope is an integral part, hope for something that is an integral part of who we are as human beings. And With each generation, right, the computers would crush the human rebellion only to allow a new one to build up. And yet still humanity persisted. And in the scene you would have seen, the one computer is asking Neo, or Mr. Anderson, why? Why do you persist? And his answer at the end, it was actually much longer than this, but I didn't memorize the clip, so, and so he says, he gets up, and he's of course almost defeated, and he gets up and says, I persist because I choose to. Because I choose to. In the end, he's working with other computers, he sacrifices himself, which causes the bad computers to explode, and he saves humanity, a happy ending for everyone but him. So yes, even though despite the hardship, despite the long odds, despite the common sense telling us to sell out or to give up because it's just too hard, we can choose another way. We can choose. Yes, we often like the status quo. It gives us comfort. But comfort never leads to or creates change. I read a great analogy about this, about the creation of a pearl inside an oyster. When sand gets into the oyster, irritating it, the oyster secretes a substance to defend itself, and it is that substance that creates the beautiful pearl. The substance. So yes, I encourage you to get irritated now and then, to get irritated at racial injustice, to get frustrated at the lack of peace in the world, to become exasperated with the lack of action on climate change. Let that irritation, frustration, exasperation lead us to act, to create a beautiful pearl of a world. Let it lead us to make different choices if we hope to have a better future for our descendants 7 generations from now. And some of those choices will require sacrifices on our part. A willingness to risk the comfortable and the convenient. A willingness to risk the status quo. A willingness to enlarge the circle. A willingness to be innovative and try something new, try something different. And that is why we found our way here together. But let it not stop here. Let us not accept good as good enough. Brene Brown, in the same book that I quoted from before, said, and I quote, we develop a hopeful mindset when we understand that some worthy endeavors will be difficult and time-consuming and not enjoyable. If we want to cultivate hopefulness, we have to be willing to be flexible and demonstrate perseverance. Not every goal will look and feel the same. Tolerance for disappointment, determination, and a belief in the self, belief in the self, are the heart of hope. End quote. So what gives us hope? What is it that gives us hope? So it's enough to say I choose to have it, but what gives us? Well, I have to say it's easier to look back on life, honestly, and see the road traveled, to see the accomplishments achieved, to see lives touched and changed. To see the hurdles we have overcome, the mountains we have scaled, the races we have run. And yes, we may recognize some of the shortcuts that we have taken, the opportunities that have been lost. It's easier to look back and see the long view and see where we've come from to where we are now. And that is what gives me hope, to take the long view looking forward. It may not be something that's completed in my lifetime. Just as builders of York Cathedral, which if we had this up you would see, which reportedly took over 250 years to build, or Stonehenge, or the Great Wall of China, all of these were built over multiple lifetimes, multiple generations. And each generation did their part, and each generation does their part to create a better future, even if it doesn't change or become apparent in their own lifetime. And we can look back and marvel at the Great Wall of China or at these other buildings, but at the time the people were building them, it wasn't complete. And so just as our work today, even though it may not be complete, we have to have hope that that somewhere in the future those will be completed by our descendants. But we have to do our part in the building of the future. It's easy to look back and know that change comes slowly. That love at first sight needs to be constantly worked at, and that it is always worth the short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain. But it's not always so easy to see that going forward. You know, sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning can seem a challenge. You know, and I think about all the things, you know, if you think about every single thing you had to do, it could be like, you know, almost 200 things you're doing just to get out of the house in the morning. You know, and think about it, get out of bed, put on my slippers, put on my bathrobe, open the door, go to the bathroom, leave the bathroom stuff out, but, you know, come out, dry off, put on my socks, put on this, go get breakfast, put up the coffee. If you think about it, it's like 200 things that you do. It can be daunting when you think about it that way, right? But we don't think about it that way. We think about it in one thing, getting ready to go out the door, right? Getting ready to leave the house. And it seems so much easier to comprehend it that way, right? So I try to remember that when I am planning a new venture, right? Planning is important, but it is also important to focus on what the hoped-for outcome is. For us as a congregation, we have a mission to guide us on that, to create a vibrant, welcoming, diverse church family which embraces individual searches for meaning and devotes itself to community good. Everything we do as a congregation should be guided by it. And there are many different people who have different ideas about how to get there. And we will try some things, and some will work and some will not, but we will keep on trying because we know where we are headed. And we know one other thing. We are in this together, and that love will guide us. You know, I saw this movie this weekend, Interstellar. It's just been out for a few weeks. Anybody see Interstellar? Well, okay. So it was a little slow at times, I admit. And I really don't know about the science underpinning the movie, but it did give me a couple of different perspectives of how our actions affect the future. So I recommend it to you. Plus, if you like space flight, but there was a point in the movie where the characters were forced to make a tough decision. And one made the decision with pure utilitarian rationale, and the other was guided by love. And the character who makes their choice by love says, and I quote, "So listen to me when I say love isn't something that we invented. It's observable, powerful. It has to mean something. Maybe it means something more, something we can't yet understand. Maybe it's some evidence, some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive yet. Love is the one thing that we're capable of perceiving that transcends time and space. Maybe we should trust that, even if we can't understand it." End quote. So I want you to think about that for just a second. You know, think about who you love in this world, right? We love those who they may live far away from us. We still love those who have passed away. And yes, I still love my descendants who are not even born yet. I love my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, even though they don't all exist. Or I hope. Let us make our choices. So my point is love transcends time and space. I just want you to think about it. And I want you to think about that as you make your choices, as we all make our choices with limited knowledge. Not on some utilitarian equation, but rather based on love. With every word we utter, with every step we take, with every action we initiate, let them all be guided in the ethic of love. Love for ourselves, love for others, and love for the earth itself. For I believe our lives do have meaning and do have purpose. We're fighting for something more than our survival. We are fighting for freedom, for truth, for justice, and mostly for love. May we have the patience and the resiliency to see it through. May we have hope. May it be so.